Question 7. Use integration by parts to find the integral of 18x sin 3x dx. So what this question is basically saying then, it says to us this: 18x sin 3x is quite a complicated thing to integrate. So why don't you use the process called the integration by parts in order to find a simpler way to integrate this? How do we do that then? Well, the first thing we have to do is we look at our 18x and 3x and we try to identify two separate functions that make that up. In this case it's pretty obvious. The two functions that make this up are 18x and sin 3x. It's not always simple, but it is simple in this case. So we know our integral can be expressed as a product of two functions, 18x and sin 3x. How does that help us? Well, the next thing we do, we write down the integration by parts formula, which is this. It's the integral of f of x g dash of x dx is equal to the product f of x g of x, take away the integral of f dash of x g of x dx. And that is our formula. And we have to follow that formula when we're solving this problem. So the first thing we have to do then, which one, 18x or sin 3x, should be f of x and which one should be g dash of x. Ultimately we want a simpler integral to integrate in our formula. So what do we choose? Well, okay, well it's one or the other. Why don't we choose g dash of x to be equal to 18x and f of x to be equal to sin 3x, and see where that takes us. So okay, we'll do that, write that down. The first thing we need to find the product. Now it's a product of f of x times g of x. So we've got f of x, we know that's sin 3x, so write that down, that's simple enough. But g of x, well that's the antiderivative of g dash of x. And g dash of x we've chosen to be 18x. So, and the antiderivative of 18x is 9x squared. We just integrate, I'm assuming you know what the rules are. So now our product is 9x squared times cosine times sin 3x, which is fine, that's perfectly fine. Take away the integral of f dash of x gx. Now f dash of x, well that's the derivative of sin 3x. And the derivative of sin 3x is 3 cos 3x. So write that in. And we multiply that by g of x, which we've already worked out to be 9x squared. So now we have the integral of 9x squared times 3 cos 3x. That's a much more difficult and complicated thing to integrate. Now we haven't done anything wrong, nothing here that's improper or inconsistent. It's just that we've ended up with a much more complicated thing to integrate, which is entirely beside the point. So choosing f of x to be sin 3x and g dash of x to be 18x was not a judicious choice. Now a person with more experience in these matters wouldn't have made that choice. He would not have chosen f of x to be equal to sin 3x and g dash of x to be equal to 18x. That would not have been a choice to make, for a simple reason. If you chose f of x to be equal to 18x, then f dash of x is immediately simplified to 18. And that's simpler that appears in the integration, the new integration. If you take g dash of x to be equal to sin 3x and you find the antiderivative of that, you get a cosine function. And that isn't necessarily more complex. In fact, it isn't more complex. So you end up with a simplification and something that isn't any more complex in your new integration, and that's why it's simpler to integrate. And you acquire this experience through simply doing equations. So if ever you see any function at all, x times a sine or a cosine, your x will always be f of x and your g dash of x will always be the trigonometric function, and it will work.